Welcome to Construction Champions Podcast, where we are burning the house down and rebuilding it twice a week. I'm your host, Rod Nussbaum, and I am here to help you become the champion that you're meant to be. Along with our amazing guests along the way, we will provide you with the resources, the latest and greatest. You will sit down with disruptors in the construction industry. And my goal from day one has always been to change the mindset around the construction industry. No more where we let the 3% of bad apes dictate the entire reputation of. All right, construction champions, welcome back to another amazing episode of Construction Champions Podcast. Where twice a week, we are bringing you the biggest and brightest minds in the construction industry to help you become that champion that you're meant to be. And before we dive into it today, you could just do us a solid and hit one of those buttons there. Whether it's the like or the follow, subscribe. I don't know where you're currently watching this, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, but it really helps us get out in front of more people. It helps us live our mission of changing the mindset around the construction industry. And you know what? It just brings more people into the community that you're already part of. So, Construction Champions, let's get into it today. Russ, it is fantastic to have you here today.
Thanks so much, Ron. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, man. Why don't you introduce yourself to all the construction champions that might not have caught our last episode we did together about a year and a half ago?
Sure. So Russ Stephens, co-founder of the Association of Professional Builders, which, despite its title, is actually a business coaching company purely for residential home builders. So we typically deal with probably about 66% of our market is custom home builders and about 33% remodelers. But they're the two markets that we focus on. And we provide business advice for these guys. So we don't get involved in advising these guys how to build. The builders that come to us, they're pretty good at that. They're masters, but they maybe didn't have some of the fundamentals or even some of the advanced skills in business. And that's where we come in, because we help these guys identify with the number one thing that might be holding them back in their business. You know, when a lot of builders hit this glass ceiling where they can't seem to power past. And invariably, the problem is not where they expect it to be. So by using data analysis, we can make data-driven decisions, find that one thing pretty quickly, and whether it's in marketing, advertising, sales, operations, financials, or even themselves, we'll help them overcome that challenge and take their building company to the next level.
And if I do say so myself, you guys are a worded class organization and a real class act, as I've gotten to know yourself and multiple people in your organization over the last couple of years. So I couldn't speak highly enough of you and what you guys do.
Thanks so much, Ron. That's lovely to hear.
Awesome. Let's dive in there. I'm going to ask the $1 million question, and that is, what makes a construction champion?
A construction champion. Well, I think you touched on it right at the beginning, just when we were chatting before we came on air, and it's the mindset, really, and what you're doing in helping to change the mindset of people by opening them up to new ideas. I think that's probably the single biggest factor that will make a construction champion, because I guess when I think back to when we started in 2014 now, 2014, and we came in with this crazy idea for builders that they should be earning 10% net profit. it was so crazy. And obviously, yeah, we're based in Australia. As you know, some of your listeners might not realize, but we actually have more builders that we work with in the US than Australia now. So the US has overtaken, but we started in Australia, and those guys can be quite brutal, especially when you're in a room with them. And we'd bring this idea that they could earn 10% net profit, and a lot of them would fall off their chair laughing. Some would get up and walk out in pure anger. This is rubbish, and would storm out the room. But it wasn't a generally accepted idea. And that's because builders have been doing it tough for so long. Very, very few building companies were kind of achieving that level of success. And I think there's so many myths, so much bad advice, hearsay. There wasn't a lot of fact around. So for any builder coming into the industry, it's a case of like, what should I add? Yeah, they don't know. And they might look at a $500,000 contract they're pricing up and kind of think in terms of dollar amounts, and the thought of making 50,000 net. So, you're talking about adding, $150,000 onto a project. The idea of making that in net profit after drawing a wage for themselves as well, that kind of seemed absurd and even a little bit greedy as well for some guys. So that didn't go down too well right at the beginning, but we've managed to find a few builders, thankfully, at the beginning that had the right mindset, that were literally at a point where they'd had enough of doing it too hard, and they were on the verge of throwing in the towel, and they were ready to try something different. And by working with those guys, getting them to the point where we felt builders should be, but then documenting that and sharing that, we were able to spread the word with proof. That compounded over time, and now here we are, 11 years later, and in the latest survey of the industry that we did, we now have 3/4 of the industry targeting a 10% net profit in 2025, which is just phenomenal to see.
I love that. And mindset does matter. Why do you think the mindset when we start talking about profit, like I believe some guys think they run nonprofits, and like we're not, like we are in the business of making money. And for some reason in construction, like that can be, like you said, it's kind of looked at as it can be greedy, but like we're in any other business, it's okay to make money. But in construction, sometimes we just, that mindset of, I'll just eat it on this one. And it has to change.
Yeah, look, I think a big factor here is that the vast majority of builders do not truly know their numbers. And to be successful in business, you've got to know your numbers. And one of the key areas that we see when builders come to us is, first of all, there's work in progress, which is a whole topic on its own. But the other aspect that tends to get overlooked is the fixed expense ratio. So these are all those overheads, like your salary, market salary. That's got to be one of the first things that goes into fixed expenses that you got a budget for. Fuel, rent, all these associated costs that don't come out of the cost of sale for a project. These are your fixed expenses, and they have to be covered from the gross profit. So you've got your revenue, you've got your cost of sales, that leaves your gross profit. Then all your fixed expenses have got to come out of that. And that is a ratio. It's typically a formula for a well-run building company. And a lot of builders, they don't understand their current ratio. And because of that, that's why they simply guess at the amount of gross profit they need to add to a job. And it also means that when they're under pressure to win a job, they'll sacrifice that gross profit because they're not fully understanding that they're actually working for nothing. When they get to the end of the year and they have apportioned their fixed expenses, they're going to end up with a big zero on the bottom line, or even slightly negative. And nowhere is this more evident than when they get asked to do a job for friends and family, or even one of their staff, like a supervisor, wants to do a build, and they may have the perception it's not really costing them anything. Yeah, the guy's the supervisor. It's okay. He'll kind of manage it in his own time. And I'm just going to add on like 5% because that'll cover my cost. No, it won't. If you only add 5% to your cost of materials, you're probably going to lose in the region of about 10% on that job. So, if your supervisor's building a $600,000 job, you've just given him a $60,000 bonus. That's the reality. And it's the same for friends and family. And those guys, they won't realize that we're actually funding their homes. They'll still get, let's be honest, they're still going to get upset because they think you're making a fortune out of them, because they think builders earn a fortune, don't they? So, if their build comes out of 600,000 instead of 660, for instance, they're not going to thank you. They're going to think, oh, dear, I thought that was going to be more like 400, or my friend had a similar build done a couple of years ago for 300. Well, yeah, of course they did pre-COVID, but they're never going to be grateful. So why would you go through all that pain? I even heard of a builder that a friend of mine does investment properties, funny enough, going off track here, but he does investment properties. So he actually finds the investors and then gives the contracts to builders. He had a builder come to him and said, please, can I sign an exclusive contract with you so that I can only build through you and I can't do any other builds? And he's like, well, sure, like why? And he said, because I don't want to build for friends and family. And he said, but I've got this contract, I can tell them no. So, you got to be able to say no to people without having to tie yourself into those kind of contracts. But that kind of highlights the problem of signing these types of contracts.
Yeah. So fixed cost, operational cost, you bring up such a great point that I don't think we have covered on here of over 200 episodes. And it is something that I watch people neglect, where they're just saying, this is our costs, we will add this on and we'll be good. And then next thing, like you said, it's the fuel, it's the rent, it's all this stuff that happens. We don't have a percentage that we're saying, this is our fixed cost, this is what it takes for us to keep the lights on. We can't just charge a certain percentage over and think we're going to make money.
Yeah, absolutely right. And what happens as well is typically in the early stages of a building company, as they start to take on bigger and more complex jobs as well, they look at the dollar figure of profit, and in an attempt sometimes to win these jobs, they actually compromise their gross profit because they look at the dollar amount and think, oh, I can knock 50,000 off of that, because that's what the client's told them they need. If you have 50,000, cheaper, and I'll sign the contract, they might look at the dollar figure and think, yeah, I can afford to do that. So they actually reduce their gross margin percentage on the larger, more complex jobs. But what they don't always realize is their fixed expense ratio is going to be even higher on those jobs, because instead of running 3 jobs concurrently, 3 small ones, you might only be able to run like the equivalent of this one big one at a time, because the amount of supervision that it consumes. So it's actually affecting your capacity. So when you kind of zoom out and look at your accounts over the course of a year, you've actually, you might do the same amount of revenue, but you've made a lot less money because you've compromised your gross profit, because your fixed expenses don't go away. They're still the same. So really, really important to understand that number. What we actually get builders to do, we've actually built out a calculator for builders. We call it pricing for profit. And instead of pricing jobs the way almost every builder like typically prices, which is to calculate the cost of goods, the materials and the labor, and then add a percentage to that, the gross markup, and then simply hope to make a net profit by covering their fixed expenses. We've actually built out a calculator which allows a builder to look at how many jobs they're going to do over the course of the year, what their fixed expenses are over the course of the year, how many jobs they've got the resources to run concurrently, and then we can factor out in what is the cost per day, per job, based on fixed expenses. When you understand that figure, you can then extrapolate that across the length of the job. So when you're pricing the job, it's very important that you don't just calculate what it's going to cost you. You've got to calculate the timeline as well, because when you got the timeline, you can factor in the fixed expenses by, obviously multiplying your cost per project per day by the amount of days. Now what you've got is a true cost to build. It's your break-even point, effectively. So when you go in to try and sign a contract and the client starts trying to renegotiate, because they're the guy, aren't they? They've got to show the wife that they can knock this guy down a bit, and which they try to do a lot of the time. Your line in the sand, because you're not going to go below that line. You're better off sitting on the beach for 6 months rather than taking that job on. So what you're adding on now is your net profit. Now, the beauty of that is when you're focused on adding that net profit, that you end up at the end of the year with a net profit on top of your wages, your market salary wages, I should add. But the other thing it does is it focuses your mind on that net profit. So once that contract starts and all of a sudden they want to do a change order, and in a lot of instances, builders might look at the $3 million contract. I'm not going to charge the guy for $150 for a change order. I'll just do that as a bit of goodwill because I'm going to get a review. Like, no, you're not. That is coming straight out your net profit, and you're not going to get a review if you give it away for free in a lot of cases, because now the consumer's thinking, crikey, there must have been a bit of fat in that job. What else can I get? And this is why when you start giving a little bit, they start asking for more and more. It's not because you got a bad client from the start. It's because you've actually trained them to do that.
100%. That calculator sounds amazing. I remember when I was working on those calculations to figure those numbers up for us, so we knew where we needed to be at. We needed to be doing $5,000 a day per crew for us to make the money we wanted to make. Like, we knew that was what the standard was. Anything less than that, like you said, we might as well be on the beach. Like, it does not make sense because the company can't suffice. Anything above that, it didn't mean that we made way more money on it. It just meant that was the point. Like, if we didn't do $5,000 a day per crew, we would lose money. If we did that, we made the money that the company needed to make to survive. And a lot of times we did more than $5,000 a day, but we knew what that point was. And it did allow us to say no to some jobs where we just knew, this is not,
Isn't it?
This is not going to be positive for us. It's not going to be positive for the customer. And those are always the customer you give the $150 thing to for free. Like you said, it ends up being the worst thing. That $150 thing ends up being the problem. You can't collect the final payment on that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you guys are working through this, we started on mindset. What's one of the biggest mindset shifts that these guys that are running these construction businesses have to have in order to wrap their mind around, we're going to run a profitable business and we're going to think about that first? What's the thing that they need to wrap their mind around?
Yeah, I like that, because this is the typical way that we kind of coach builders, because builders come to us typically because they feel they're doing okay. They've got to a certain point, and if they just had a few more contracts to take their building company to the next level, everything would sort itself out. Now, the truth is that's not the case. Because the reason they're in the situation that they are is because their margins aren't high enough, which is stopping them from employing more people to do the work and allowing them to focus on the things that are going to grow the company. But a lot of builders, they kind of get into this cycle where they don't always see that, and they don't understand the margins that they should be earning. Therefore, they think their margins are fine. They just think it's leads that are holding them back. So a lot of builders come to us, and the vast majority, I'd say, because they want more leads. It's either they want more quality leads, or they just want to be able to close more into sales. It's normally one of those two things. However, when we coach builders, we always start with their financials because, like I say, it's something like 95% are not accurate and they're looking at a false picture. And the main reason for that is the work in progress calculation, which is very misunderstood in the industry. And around 95% of builders do not have this figure accurately represented in their accounts month to month, not even year to year, let alone month to month. So if you don't have that, your accounts aren't real. If you're looking at the bank balance, you're going to end up in serious trouble in a few years' time, if not now, especially if you're doing new construction. So you really got to understand that. So we always start with that. And when we start with this very little known calculation that 95% of accountants don't know, and the reason for that is because they're not construction specific. A very small percentage that are construction specific do understand this, but yeah, there's not many of them. Your general CPA will not understand this. They've been taught something different. So when we teach this to builders, they're kind of a bit bewildered. It's like, how did I not know this? This number is so important. But when we show them how to calculate this number and then we fix up their accounts, the blood will drain out their face because all of a sudden they thought they were doing okay. They just needed more leads to get to the next level. Now there's a realization that they're not making any money. They might be covering a salary at best, but in most cases, they're not even doing that. They're actually operating at a loss, but they didn't realize it. And where they thought they had equity in their building company, all of a sudden it's technically insolvent. Now, if they have got a bit of momentum at the time, this is a good time to turn things around. The saddest thing for our coaches is when builders come to us too late. They're literally the final nails going in the coffin. We can't do anything to help them, but if they've got a bit of momentum, then we can turn things around. But showing them where they really are, that leads to a massive mind shift because all of a sudden they get, well, first of all, it's shock, disbelief, I got to say, because, if you thought you had $500,000 in your building company, and why wouldn't you? Because you've got, probably like 600,000-700,000 in the bank account. Why would you suddenly believe that we're showing you that you've only got $1,000 or maybe even minus 100,000? Like, you guys don't know what you're talking about is the general kind of response. But we when we show them the proof and how this calculation works and the real position they're in, once they've absorbed it, they get angry because now they realize that they've done all these jobs for nothing because they've been adding like 20% markup to their jobs, which barely covers their fixed expenses. And when something goes wrong or they give stuff away, they're actually coming out the end of the job slightly underwater each time. So that leads to a bit of anger and frustration, but it leads to an instant shift in mindset. Okay, I'm going to change. So now they want to add more margin. They understand that adding 20% to new construction isn't going to cut it. The benchmark is 33.3% for new homes, which is quite staggering for a lot of people to comprehend, but that equals a 25% margin. And with your fixed expenses typically at 15% because of the owner's salary and what you need to invest in marketing, you're going to come out with 10% net. So how do they get to that? Well, you can't just suddenly put your margins up overnight because, as builders quite rightly say, if I did that, I'd never win another job. But you can put them up 2 or 3% immediately with almost no impact whatsoever. And that's the starting point. But the next question is, well, how do I get to the benchmarks? And that is where marketing and sales process come into play. So we got to where they wanted to be, but we had to take them on a journey because if we had just allowed them to continue pricing their jobs in the same way and given them what they wanted, which was to show them, because I'll be honest, marketing for a building company is very easy. It's very easy to generate leads when you know what you're doing, or you've got an agency that knows what they're doing. It's incredibly easy. And even selling building contracts is incredibly easy. I mean, look at the builders that, they're not, they're not as good as you. We got the chuck in a truck types out there signing contracts. It's not hard. The difficult thing is signing contracts at a margin that allows your building company to grow safely and securely. Anyone can sign a contract below cost. Problem is, a lot of these guys don't realize they're selling below cost. I mean, yeah, we can all work for free. That is easy. Anyone can do it. But to add value or sell on value and sell at a premium price, you've got to just demonstrate value. That means you've got to have your marketing correct. You've got to be advertising. You can't rely on referrals, and you've got to have a repeatable sales process. So we kind of get there, but we have to show the path that they were on was leading to a dead end, and absolute they were going to be destroyed if they stayed on this path. Because as you scale up a building company, it actually gets worse. You just accelerate the losses as well, which is what we see. How many times you heard a builder actually say, I used to do 25 homes a year, yeah, but I'm just doing 6. I make more money out the 6 than I did out the 25. This is, small is better. And they're probably quite right. They probably are making more money, but the reality is it wasn't that small is better. It's just that they followed the wrong model.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. And it's always the chasing or tear of the next big job is going, but the next big job is what could bankrupt you. Because this,
yeah. If I just got this big one, I'd be okay. It's like you're just kicking the can down the road, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think one of the most mind-blowing things that you said, at least it should be for all listeners out there, is when you said you can immediately add 2 or 3% and it's not going to change a whole lot. And I know a lot of people out there that are just like, we got to nickel and dime this. It has to be like, we have to be the bare minimum bid because that's the only way we're going to win work. That right there speaks to the opposite of that. And I'm a component that's not how it should be. Is you should be pricing stuff in a way where you can make sure your employees have somewhere to work in a year from now so they can still feed their families. That revolves around you having a profitable business. So if you can torch it up 2 or 3% immediately, like that completely now avoids that whole argument for people.
Oh, absolutely. We have a monthly team meeting, APB wide. So we've got a team all around the world, all come together once a month. And part of that meeting is our head of coaching, Andy Scarda. He shares client wins from each of our coaches. So it's good for the whole team to hear how we're impacting the industry and to hear real stories in a lot of detail, stuff that we can't share publicly, because a lot of builders wouldn't want that kind of detail of information getting out. But there was one builder that one of our coaches had been working with, and he'd had a $1.6 million contract he'd been working on, and the client, he said it was too expensive. Now, to be fair, if he got to that point and the client said it's too expensive, he hasn't followed the process correctly because it shouldn't have been a surprise. But nonetheless, it's progress, not perfection. But he's got to that point. The client's basically says no, but he held his ground. He wouldn't negotiate. He wouldn't drop his price. And the client went away, and it was disappointing. But 2 weeks later, the client came back and just signed the contract, at the price he wanted. Now, part of that, being able to do that and hold your nerve, is by having an abundance of demand versus supply. So I think what happens with a lot of builders and how they kind of get into this downward spiral is they service the demand. But the key in business is to never service the demand. It's to cap your supply so that you always have excess demand. And that's never more true than in building. Because if we have more clients wanting to build with us than we can physically do, some builders feel awkward, like saying, I can't do it, or I can't start for a year, or I can't even start for 18 months. But that is gold. Clients will actually brag about that to their friends. Like, the builder I'm going with, he's so booked out, he can't start for a year. Like, you hear this all the time. You want to be that builder. So we actually use a technique called construction slots to cap the demand, cap the supply, and the demand builds up. And what that does is it not only gives the builder security because they've got 18 months of work in front of them, but What it also does is it gives them so much power in the sales process. So you actually go through this kind of trigger point where you go from trying to like grab every prelim contract that you're working on and trying to convert it into a contract because you need it, because you've got one finishing, we need another one starting. You actually go beyond that because now you've got a backlog, you're quite relaxed and you've got a client and the room, it's like, it's no problem. The earliest start date I've got is June 2026. But after that, I'm then fully booked out. The earliest is going to be January, like 2027. So if you want to get locked in on this one, we've got to get this contract signed and the deposit paid. But I've got 2 others that I'm just about to present with as well. So that June slot could go if you don't do it before then. Now we've created scarcity and urgency, and we're not even being salesy. This is what builders love about it. They're not being salesy. They're just being open and honest and being themselves. And it works like an absolute charm.
Well, it's just controlling your calendar, and that is not a typical mindset. I remember when we made the decision that we were going to run at a minimum a 6 to 8 week backlog. We were not like that. It's just what it was going to be, period. And that was not our industry standard at all. And there was a lot of pushback, but it didn't affect the end customer at all. Like, it didn't matter if the other company could get out there in 2 weeks. They wanted to do business with us. And if we were 6 to 8 weeks, like you said, it adds this whole thing around what we're doing. It's like, who really wants the builder? Like, you deal with a lot of custom home builders. Like, who wants the custom home builder that can start next week to build their custom home? Like,
it's just like restaurants, isn't it? Yeah, you go to a new place, like a new town or whatever that you've not been to before. Yeah, you see a row of restaurants. There's one that's full up, busy, and there's people queuing, waiting for a table. Next door is empty. There's 2 or 3 people in there. Like, you join the queue, don't you? You think, like, this is, the locals must know something. It's natural instinct. Funny enough, we got this whole strategy of construction slots from a restaurant. Actually here in Australia, like where I'm actually living on the Gold Coast in Australia. And there's this restaurant that you can never get booked into. And I finally managed to get booked into it. I think it was a friend that managed the book, and we went along, and there was nothing amazing about it. I mean, it was nice. The food was nice. Yeah. Service was good. They were friendly. It wasn't exceptional. Lovely views out over the ocean. But there was nothing to explain why, whenever I tried to book a table in this restaurant, they just laughed at me. Yeah, can I get a table next week? Oh, ha, ha, ha. Sorry, sir. Until I figured out what their strategy was. Now, any restaurant you want to book, pretty much you can jump online these days, and you can book it, a year in advance. But with this restaurant, if you jump online, you can't. And the reason for that is they only open up their calendar 60 days in advance. So that means they've got less supply than any other restaurant in the area. And because of that, they're now in demand. So if you want to book a table with this restaurant, you've got to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 60 days out from when you want a table. And then you can get your booking in, because by midday, that day is now booked out. And the whole restaurant is booked out again. It's just, it's simplicity, it's supply and demand. And like I say, there's nothing exceptional about it. And that's what gave us the idea for construction slots. It's how we built out the whole system and training for the builders to use.
I love it. I love that. And because, that it just works. And most people would say you got to figure out how to add more seats to that restaurant. But what they've done is they've miraculously probably figured out exactly the number of seats they need to hit their profits they want to hit. And they just fill it up every day. And that's all you have to do in any business is figure out what that number is and then create scarcity around what you're offering.
Yeah, and what they probably did, in all honesty, was they started out with less seats and stuck to that capacity. They didn't increase it with demand. They waited until they had over demand, and then they gradually increased it. So they were still getting sold out, and no one even noticed. And this is how builders increase their margins and increase their revenue at the same time in a lot of cases as well, because they look a year ahead they plan out their availability based on their setup and their resources. But then when they're doing their next quarterly strategic plan, they might look a year in advance and think, okay, we have so much demand coming through. We're going to increase that by, 50% even. They can, we're going to have put the resources in place, and we know we got the demand to fill that up, and they still remain like booked out, but they start increasing. So yeah, it's a fantastic system.
It's amazing what you can do when you start to put it all together, work with somebody like you that understands you and your team, how to actually put all this together. So this has been an amazing conversation here today. For everybody listening, if they wanted to connect with you, learn more about what you guys do, where's the best places for them to do that?
Look, I'd say a good place is to, if you're jumping online, just Google the Association of Professional Builders and check out the website. You can find a lot of free resources on there. What I'd say as well, we do an industry report each year, the State of the Residential Construction Industry report. So I can probably give you guys a link to share with your listeners as well, so they can click straight on that and download that report for free. But yeah, there's also a link to it on our website. And yeah, if you like listening to podcasts, check out Professional Builders Secrets, where we have some great guests like Ron.
Awesome. Well, that link is for that report. We keep that active in our show notes all the time. It'll be in these show notes as well. It's an amazing resource that you guys put out there for the industry. And thank you for taking the time to be in on the show. And like I said, thank you for doing everything that you guys are doing for the construction industry. You guys have really brought a professionalism to something that in the past has not been that professional, and I love to watch it, and I love to be part of you guys' journey as well.
No, right back at you, Ron, and thanks so much for all you do for the industry in helping changing mindsets as well, and opening up minds to the possibilities. It doesn't have to be this hard for a lot of guys.
Absolutely, man. So, all right, construction champions, another episode where we dove into a lot. There's a lot of things for you guys to go start to wrap your mind around, but that mindset was a key theme throughout everything that we talked about, everything that Russ brought up. It really brought us back to what is your mindset around it? What are your conventional beliefs that are probably untrue and are probably rooted in something that has no basis, that you're running your business off of? I love when he brought up work in progress reports. And, that's one of the easiest ways to tell if you have an accountant for your construction business that can actually be an accountant for your construction business. And we've had plenty of them on here. And the ones that don't talk about work in progress, it's such a different thing in the construction industry, but it's stuff that you have to be aware of. And if you're not tracking, it can create a disillusion within your business. It creates this mindset that everything's all good, but you can feel it. Like you have it in your gut that something's not 100% right because the numbers are not coming out 100% how you feel they should. But you feel like you're squeaking by because you look at the bank account. Worst thing we can do, look at the bank account and say, there's money in there. Thank God we survived. And that's not how business is run. Like I say on here all the time, take the construction out of it and just understand you own a business. And you have to treat it like every other business, because if you don't do that, you're going to fail. It's not acceptable to say, I run a construction business, so everything's different. None of these rules apply. We run for-profit businesses. We don't run nonprofits. Start wrapping your mindset around that. Construction champions, make sure you check out all of our fantastic partners. And until next time, be the champion you were meant to be.